Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming along here today. Yes, heart attack. That's the way to start a talk, isn't it? A heart attack. Hands up, all the people in the room who've had a heart attack. Okay, anyone want to know what a heart attack feels like? No, no, I feel awful. Oh, God. I'll tell you what it is. We've got an Australian in the audience this afternoon, and it's his fault because I was watching the end of the Melbourne Grand Prix when it happened. I'd recorded it. It was nice. It was a nice afternoon like this. I was sitting in my living room, and it just got the end of the Grand Prix. Anyone enjoy Grand Prix? Yeah, they're okay. They're okay. But this one, I'm thinking that's a bit boring, isn't it? It's boring. They're quite often boring Grand Prix. This one's a bit boring. Oh God, I feel awful. Oh, I feel awful. I feel I've got flu. Oh, I hope this goes away. But of course it didn't go away, and I had to say, help, help. So that's my excuse for not finishing the book. However, because it is a bit of a thing to have to recover from, it's a bit of a shock, because obviously I'm still only the same age as I was when I was working on video games at the beginning of the 80s. Because none of us feel any older, do we? Does anyone here feel any older than they were when they were 20? No, we're all the same, aren't we? This is my story. This is the book that's coming out, and you can see some of the names of the contributors we've got in it, topped by Steve Turner, of course, who wrote Avalon. Somebody talked about Avalon this afternoon. It was their favourite game. It's one of the few games I personally have played to completion. So let's get started. This is a quote from. You can find this quote online. It's very nice about the work we did. Hewson was one of the quieter stars of the Spectrum scene. It's not often I've been called quiet, I have to say, but I am apparently one of the quieter stars of the Spectrum scene, concentrating purely on original games, which is perfectly true. Why would you do anything that wasn't original? I've never understood that. Why do people do tie-ins? I don't understand it. Without even a hint of a licensed tie-in, Hewson preferred to let the programmers be the stars and made coders such as Graf Goals, Steve Turner and Andrew Braywood, plus Raphael Chekhov and a few others into household names. Is that true? Is that true? And people know the names? Yeah, you do know the names. And of course we promoted the programmers. Who else would you promote? Here we are, we've got this fantastic product, and it's written by this guy here. You know, this is the person who did all the hard work, because it is hard work. Those of you who are coders, and there are one or two in the room here, know just how difficult a job it is. Is it not? I mean, it is challenging. You've got to spend hours and hours and hours and hours writing the stupid code, and the bloody stuff still doesn't work, in my case. I mean, you know, obviously with some of these other people, it did actually work. Most of the code I wrote fails. Their advertising strategy, you can tell this is written by a journalist, you know, who lives by writing stuff which they can then wrap advertising around it. Their advertising strategy was very reserved, usually not being booked in every magazine that covered their games. In fact, usually there'd only be 2 or 3 single-page adverts per game in total. It was a matter of luck and reading the right magazines as to whether you or not you saw them. Well, of course we didn't spend money on advertising. Why would we? Because the next comment is the one that counts. Their games spoke for themselves, consistently receiving high marks in the reviews, for which, of course, I am eternally grateful, and actually was quite surprised in the early days that we did so well. But that obviously was what we strove for, because by getting high marks in the reviews, you achieve 2 things. In fact, one thing, really. One thing, you convince the only people who count, who are the consumers. I mean, the people who are spending the money are the people who count. Nobody else matters, do they? The advertisers, the journalists, people like me, even, bless their cotton socks, the programmers actually aren't as important, the people who are actually spending their hard-earned cash. So we got consistently high marks, and that's what we were aiming for all the time. It never made any sense to me to do anything else. And to be honest, I was listening to the previous speaker talking about Doom and talking about Midway and having to cut his games before they were finished, and you know, and what have you. Was anyone else here for the previous talk? Yeah, a few of you were. And I'm thinking, yeah, very familiar story, never understood it. I mean, it half killed you to get the job, get the games out. I'm waiting for them to be done, and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. But actually, what else are you going to do? If you want a good quality product, you've got to let the guys get on and produce the thing. So, how did we get started? Why did we publish Computer Games? Why did we get high marks in reviews? Well, I've just I've answered that. Well, that's because we tried. And what are the lessons for today? Well, I'll come to that right at the end. So that's what the talk's about, and this is actually the beginning of the book. This is taken from the beginning of the book. My father was an industrial chemist. His father was an industrial chemist. My mum was a scientist as well. In fact, my parents met in a laboratory, over the test tubes. It's quite romantic, really, if you think about it. And my childhood ambition was to be a scientist. That's what I was, In fact, it was just obvious. That's what else could I possibly be? And so that's what I turned out to go on to be. Go on, tick, tick. Where did it all go wrong? Oh, that's the joke. That's the joke. Good joke, that, isn't it? There we are, that's me. That's my first job out of university. I had a degree in chemical physics, and that's me in front of the all this glassware, working at the British Museum. Who's heard of the British Museum? Yeah, there we go, in London. I thought it was a dream job. In fact, everybody told me it was a dream job. I worked on radiocarbon dating, and that's the rig that we used for converting... Anyone want to know this? Converting charcoal and bone into benzene. And then benzene, nice little liquid like that, about that much in a little vial, and counted it in a liquid scintillation counter. And that was what that apparatus was built to do. It's a one-off. It's not there anymore, it's gone. And these are the sites that I dated. Anyone recognise any of these sites? Yeah, Stonehenge, Stonehenge, Avebury. This is Knossos in Crete, where the Minotaur was. It's hugely rebuilt. This is in Ireland, Newgrange in Ireland, and that's Windmill Hill. So I can still remember all of these places I did these dates for in the 1970s. This was my job. Next slide. So if you come across somebody who says, this is Neolithic and it's in the UK, probably me that dated it, probably. Not necessarily, but probably. I got bored. Because, doing this... Because the real problem is you're doing this job for archaeologists, and at that time, they didn't really believe the dates they were getting. We're saying, this is 1800 BC, and they say, no, it's not. And you think, sorry, the result is 1800 BC, that's what it is. And they say, no, it's not, it's 800 BC. And you think, no, that's outside the error bars. And they don't ask you about what they mean by error bars, like the standard deviation on the result. They just say, it can't be 1800 BC, and you get fed up with that after a bit, don't you? Because you're doing all this work, and you give them to these people who think they know what they're talking about, and they tell you you're wrong. Well, it can't be wrong. How can it be wrong? Tell me how it can be wrong. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So I got a bit bored by that. I did a degree in probability and statistics. Anyone think that's weird? Me, to be honest, looking back on it, but I did. As a result of that, I worked on some other things at the museum. I worked on Ashanti gold weights from West Africa and proved one or two things about that, statistically about how these gold weights were used and what have you. And I came to do what you have to do when you're in an academic environment. I came to write my first scientific paper, and I discovered I couldn't write. There was all this training and what have you, and actually sitting down and writing, getting your thoughts down on paper, getting your method results to conclusion, getting it down. I found I couldn't do it. It all came out back to front, and it took me a year to write my first academic paper, and that was a shock. And that's an important part of the story, because I then left the museum because I was bored, went to work on flood statistics at a place in Oxfordshire, which is why I live in Oxford these days. And then, of course, what happened? Bing. The ZX80. This was I moved to Oxfordshire in '79. We got a 2-year-old daughter by then, and of course in 1980 this man came out with the ZX80. So we had in place motive means an opportunity. There we are. This is the reason why I got into the business, in the games business. Motive means an opportunity. That's what they do on all these crime programs on the television. Why people do things. Well, this is motive and opportunity. The motive, my career had gone, like nowhere. I was poor. That's another thing. You work in the sciences. You don't work. You're not going to earn a lot of money. It's not going to happen. and I wanted to learn how to write. So, of course, that was the motive behind it. And the opportunity was this man, Clive Sinclair, with his ZX80. And on the next screen, you'll see the means. I borrowed £500 from the bank. I went to the bank manager, chap with grey hair. He must have thought I was bloody mad. I rather pretty lent me 500 quid, and I spent 100 of it, obviously, on the ZX80. Bought the television, bought the cassette player, went to an auction. That was very exciting, buying a desk at an auction. Got a typewriter from a second-hand shop. Commandeered a third bedroom. You won't be able to do that these days, of course, at the same age, because I was in my late 20s at this time. You won't be able to do it these days because you're not allowed a third bedroom as a rule, isn't there? You're only allowed 2 bedrooms these days. But in those days we were allowed a third bedroom, and so I had it to write the book, and I started to write. And of course, it was dead easy to do it because there's the television. I'm on the desk. There's the television. There's the ZX80. There's the cassette player. There's the pad of paper. And all I did was, it says it actually on the side of the machine. Tells you what to do. Peek, poke, and all these things. It's actually on the side of the machine. So that's what I did. Just fiddled about. Worked out what was going on with the machine, wrote it down on some notes at the side there, got my wife to, my long-suffering wife, to type on this second-hand typewriter and produce the book. Hints and Tips for the ZX80, it was called, and nobody I know has ever produced a copy of that book. I don't even have a copy of that book. It's disappeared. There are... The next one which came, I put small ads in these 2 magazines, Practical Computing and Personal Computing World, which are the only ones around at the time. When I say small ads, I mean small ads, small. Advertising, here's a book, Hints and Tips for the ZX80, bing. And the next slide will tell you, yes, that's right. Then the ZX81, I sold that book, went quite well. Got it photocopied, which was a very exciting technology at the time. Photocopying was new. And then the ZX81 there, which should be dropped into the back. We produced a book on ZX81, which my wife typed up on an electric typewriter, because we'd moved on a bit by then, whilst he was on the way. This chap was on the way, so you can tell how old he is. We bought a new electric typewriter, and Hints and Tips for the ZX81 was born. And there's a copy in the room, isn't there? Go on, can you wave it for me? The Hints and Tips for the ZX81, there we are. And that also was photocopied at a photocopy shop in Wallingford. Saddle Stitch, that's the official name for having stitches down there. And we sold that. Good God, W.H. Smith bought some. W.H. Smith bought my book. Extraordinary, shocking, wonderful. Wow. And of course, the real joy was, the last talk, the guy was holding up Joy and Sorrow. Well, I was thinking, this is definitely a joy one. Coming down the stairs in the morning, dump down the stairs, there's the glass, and beyond that is the doormat, the front door beyond that. And you see through the glass door onto the doormat, and there's 2 or 3 letters on the doormat. And you know, as you come down the stairs, that you're going to pick up those letters. They're going to be from people you've never heard of, that you know nothing about, you don't know where they live, or anything about them, but you open them up and they've sent you a cheque. They've sent, or a cheque, or a postal order. Anyone remember postal orders? Yeah, postal orders. They've sent you a cheque or a postal order, and you think, I don't know you. And it's very nice, look. Oh, I could kiss you, but I can't kiss you because I don't know. Well, except I'll be arrested or something. But look, you said that's joy. That, I tell you, is joy. Going down in the morning and being welcomed like that. So that's what happened to me. And then, having got this book into W.H. Smith's and people buying it in significant numbers, a really extraordinary thing happened. Truly extraordinary, because I'm living out in Oxfordshire, is that the phone went. Hello, and it's somebody calling from an extraordinary place in London, Croydon, I think they were. Well, we're setting up this magazine, Sinclair user. Will you write a magazine column for us? Well, what would you say if somebody said that to you? What would you say? Of course, we'll pay you. All right, of course. What? Of course. Can I kiss you down the phone, please? Yes. And so they sent a photographer all the way from London. I was very impressed with that. And took this photograph here. Here it is, this one, those bricks there, you see the bricks in the back, those are the fireplace of the house I was living in at home. I can take you to the house if you like. It's the fireplace, I think it's still there. We ought to check that out, actually. It's a famous fireplace. And they came down and they took that photograph, and I look a bit young, obviously, and a bit, what the bloody hell's going on here? Because that's exactly how I felt. And so I started writing this helpline in Sinclair User, and I wrote that once a month for 10 years, 2,000 words. Anyone else? Anyone remember the helpline? Anyone read the helpline? Anyone find it useful? Yeah. Thank you. That's really nice. And I used to get about 30 letters a month, not with checks in, but with questions from people saying, how do I scroll the screen on the ZX81? You know, things like that. And I'd answer as best I could. And so the next thing that really happened as a result of this, and I don't really understand how, is that people start sending material to us to evaluate and publish for them. And the most important one by a mile was Mike Mail, who wrote the night flight simulator for the ZX Spectrum. Anyone remember that one? Yeah, I thought it was a great game. A great program. First time how would I ever have experience of flying? He was an air traffic controller at Heathrow and a flying fanatic, and that's him. Look at that little grin. There we are. He was an air traffic controller, and his work was excellent. He sent us Night Flight. We put it on the market. It sold loads of copies. And as it says there, his stuff was just brilliant. I mean, if all our air traffic controllers are as thorough as Mike Mail, we're in good hands. And he also produced for us these other simulators, Southern Belle and Evening Star, which he wrote with a mate who was a sort of steam engine fanatic. Schiphol, we went over to Schiphol to do that. Did another version of Heathrow Air Traffic Control. And it won't be a surprise for you to know that what he's doing these days is, he's running a company which makes airport simulators. So, and you sit there with a bank of screens like that, and it's just a view of some airport, Kuwait or somewhere, all the aircraft movements, not in the air but on the ground. And so his company, that's what his company does these days, down in Southampton or thereabouts. Yeah, with the ZX Spectrum, of course, the world was getting moving by the time the ZX Spectrum came out. In terms of that was a massively successful machine. I mean, the ZX81 was pretty successful, but the Spectrum blew it away. And of course, this is 1982, which is the Falklands War. And there we are at the ZX Micro Fairs. I have a very clear memory of being at one of the ZX Micro Fairs in London, in the Central Hall, Westminster, with our stands selling books and games and what have you, and all around the room. The room, probably about as big as the room downstairs, full of people, selling stuff. And those TVs around the various people. And on the TVs, the odd one, there's pictures of people, shooting and dying in the Falklands and what have you. Really quite... anyone else remember the Falklands War and remember being quite shocked by it? It's shocking, I thought. That's a memory that I've got lodged in my mind from that year. And so I wrote a couple more books, and the one on the right with John Hardman, where he wrote all the difficult bit, which is the code, and I wrote all the easy bit, which is the words describing what the code does. So, and W.H. Smith took loads of those, and we sold them in droves. They must have, tens of thousands. I have no idea how many we sold, 100,000 copies. I don't know, loads of them. W.H. Smith's wonderful people. And of course, we were getting games sent in to us for, and I mean loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of games coming through. Most of them were not really very good. Why would that be? It's because writing code is really difficult, isn't it? So of course, lots of people are trying it, but most people haven't got the skills, haven't got the training, haven't got the practice. And then in amongst them, you get somebody like Steve Turner. The first one we got from him was 3D Space Wars, if anyone remembers that. and here he is on the left, and of course you spend 5 minutes loading that up on the spectrum. Do you remember it's on the spectrum? Do you remember that? 5 minutes loading up, thinking, oh, I wonder what this one's going to be like. Oh, I could make a cup of tea while this. Oh, there it is, bing, and you think, oh no, this is very good, very good, very good. 3D, very simple 3D, just sketched out, running on the spectrum against a black background, and of course as soon as you see that you think, oh, I've got to go and see this guy, talk to him, get to know him, find out what's going on. And Steve produced 3D Zydab Attack. God, that's a crap name, isn't it? Who thought of that? Sorry. Loon Attack, and then Avalon, which is the one I mentioned earlier in the bottom right-hand corner, which I just thought was fantastic. Fantastic game. Just again, black background, the 3D just sketched in. No pretense about drawing the whole screen. Just enough brickworks, a few doors. I can see some nods around the room. Just enough. A little wizard can't make this wizard walk. It's too complicated. The animation is called. We'll make him float on a carpet. There we are. And now I like that, don't you? Don't you? I like that when somebody says. We've only got a little synthetic spectrum here. We can't do what we'd like to do. We'll cheat. Instead of making the wizard walk, we'll put him on a carpet. Now that's cheating, isn't it? Isn't that cheating? That's cheating. It is cheating. So yes, it is cheating, isn't it? But isn't it a fantastic way to cheat? It's just saying this is an irrelevant problem. The problem isn't relevant to the game, is it? Whether the guy walks or floats in a carpet, make him float in a carpet then. Now I love that because actually that's the key to a lot of the really good work that was done in these early days was just seeing the problem in its true context. What was a relevant problem and what's one you're just sort of creating for no good reason. So that's Steve Turner and that's his various games there. Anyone recognise what that is up at the top there? Dragon Talk. That's actually used in the artwork from Dragon Talk. That is a genuine. This is my museum background coming into play. That's the Snettisham Talk. That's a real thing. You can go and see that in the museum, and it's big enough for you to sort of spring it, and pop it round your neck. And it may have been worn like that, or it may have been used because the smaller versions of these things were effectively like toggles to hold two buttonholes together. That's the real origin of the things. The Snettisham Talk, and the story about that, of course, is that where I worked in the museum, we were in the basement, and sort of along the basement, along there, a few yards away, was the workshop where they made fakes. Now, you won't believe that the British Museum would make fakes, but I'm telling you the truth, the museum has a special workshop where they make fakes. Because if you go into your back garden and dig and find something like the Snettisham Talk, it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the Queen. Well, the state. And the state takes it from you and says, we'll have that, we'll stick that in the British Museum, but I tell you what, will be really nice to you, you can have a fake. And so they make you a fake. That's the story, that's the Snettisham Talk. And it was a very straightforward sequel to Avalon, nice game, nothing very complicated, a way of making more money for Steve and us from him repeating a certain amount of work. Next one, Bing. And of course, Steve knew Andrew Braybrook. And, I can remember him telling me, well, I've got this new chap and, I want to take him on and blah, blah, blah. And, great, good, Steve. And it turns out to be Andrew Braybrook. And Andrew produced this one, Gribbly's Day Out. That's his first piece. Anyone remember Gribbly's? Yeah. What do you think of it? Fabulous, isn't it? It's probably my favourite game of almost of all time, I would say. It's all of those who've never played Gribbly's or seen Gribbly's, please go and find it, and because it's just a completely original piece of work. Am I right? It's really well, yes. I'm going to come on. Hard back there. All the games at that time were hard. We didn't realise. I mean, it was the zeitgeist. The reason they're hard, this is a digression, but it's true. The reason all the games at that time were hard was because, of course, what we were doing, not me, by the way, not me, I wasn't doing the hard work. I'm the easy guy, just sort of going out and finding these people. But what they're doing is going and playing in the arcades, and what they're trying to do is produce games that are like games in the arcades. And of course, in the arcades, the idea is you play for a minute and then you put another 10p in the slot, or 50p, or whatever it is these days. I mean, that's the whole ethos of an arcade game. So, of course, all our games were tuned so you play for a minute and then you die. And, of course, the criticism these days is they're ridiculously hard. And some people find that a challenge, and the rest of us, like normal people, think, oh, I can't be bothered with this, I'm going to do something else. Does anyone get like that with the old games these days? Did you get like that at the time? No? Okay. You didn't? Well, people are shaking their heads. That's good, isn't it? Anyway, Gribbly's Day Out was the first one. A fabulous game. Really exciting and not really well enough known. And it was the first product we put out on the C64. And then, of course, after that, the next one that Andrew did was Paradroid, which you all knew about because I took a train journey down to Devizes. When it was first coming, he was first working on it. Anyone know what was going on in Devizes at the time? Aha, little known fact. Zap64 had its first office there before it moved back to Ludlow. I took the train down to Devizes and met Chris Anderson, who was the first editor of Zap64. Obviously he knew about Gribbly's, and then we were, what are you doing next? Or Paradroid's coming, and blah, blah, blah. And we went off to the pub, the way you do, he said this thing, he said, well, I've got an idea, why don't we do a programmer diary? And of course, I'm thinking, oh, that'd be very difficult. I mean, our programmer's got to work, we can't have them distracted, writing sort of journalism. This is me, playing hard to get. But at the same time thinking, what programmer diary, fantastic, what a brilliant idea. That'll sell the thing, won't it? Won't it sell the thing? So, of course, there was a programmer diary for Paradroid, and I pretended that I thought Andrew Braybrook would find it difficult to write, which is a lie, because anyone who's seen Gribbly's and the story that you've written behind it, do you remember the packaging in Gribbly's that had the story of the Gribbly's Day Out? Do you remember that? No, people are sort of saying yes. Well, there was a whole storyline that went on for about 5,000 words that he'd written to describe the game. So I had no doubt at all that Andrew could write the diary, and that's what he did. And so by the time Paradroid came through, it had been well publicised by Zap64, all for free, by the way. We didn't have to pay for those. What a good idea! Free advertising. They get a diary, we get the coverage, and so Paradroid was very well received. And you will all know about Uridium, won't you? Everyone's played Uridium, even me. Anyone got beyond level 3? Oh well, well done. Congratulations. There aren't that many. My story with Uridium is standing in what was then Menzies in Abingdon one Saturday afternoon. What we did with Uridium, what Andrew produced for us, was a single level demo that we gave out for free. This was quite a novel thing for us to do at the time. A single level of it, and we just handed it out for free, and all the shops got it via the distributors. And so I went into Menzies, and there, sure enough, they got the one level version of Uridium playing on the screen. There's a chap playing there, and of course I'm standing behind him, which is, I like to watch how things are going on. I think he's really good at this. He's already been playing it a lot. He must have bought it, he's got it home. And of course he finishes the first level, and there's that little dink, 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 dink bit at the end. And then it's got that brilliant bit where the ship sweeps past you again. And I saw him just relax, look round. He's waiting for his mates. He's meeting somebody here in the shop, and he's just, oh, they're not here, they're not here. No, where are they? No, they're not here. Who's that chap standing behind me? And of course, that was the brilliant thing about Uridium, I thought. I don't know whether you would agree with me, but this balance between the high intensity of the play, and then this little fiddly bit at the end, ding, 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 and then just nothing to do. You just relax for it. Mentally, you go off for a cup of tea for about 10 seconds, and then it's back on. We're into the second level. Am I right about that? I saw you nodding with that. That's I took that lesson from just standing behind somebody, watching them play, that I thought, actually, that's a powerful thing. So that's Uridium, and then there's Alley Cat is next. And then there was Morpheus. A horrible story. Never mind. Life is like that. And of course, with John Phillips' Nebulus, the reason he did Impossible and Eliminator for us as well, but Nebulus is the one which is really follows on mentally from Iridium. Part of the technology in Nebulus was derived because John saw what Andrew Braybrook had done with the loading screen, the opening screen for Iridium, where there's this rainbow effect. I don't know if you remember it, across the middle of the the opening screen. And John saw that, and that's what inspired him to produce the tower effect in Iridium. And so, in that sense, Nebulus sort of came from that. And when we were setting up, because I had a meeting with John when he produced this wonderful rotating effect, and he got it running on the screen. He got some sprites running over the top of it. What are you going to do with this, John? I don't know, he said. I thought I might do a battle game. And I thought, well, that's a bit complicated. We don't. There's a lot of work in that. We don't have to do that. And so it was in that meeting. I went down to see him in Devon, in Cornwall. He lives just into Cornwall. And that's where we conceived the idea of it being a tower and the game being to climb the tower. And to make it episodic in the same way that Iridium is episodic, with a little bit at the end. It's got that. We attempted the same kind of balance as it's got in Iridium. Okay, and then what's next? So we're coming to the end of the talk now. Do you see how it wraps round? Motive, means, and opportunity. It's good, isn't it? We've thought of that all by ourselves. Copied it, really. So that was the motive, means, and opportunity. My motive was to make some money, was to learn how to write. The opportunity was the it's easy, isn't it? If somebody turns up with a computer that you can actually buy, well, there's the opportunity. And the means was really my sort of technical background in the first place. I think I was one of the few people at the time. I'm happy to be corrected about this. I was one of the few people around at the time who really sat in that gap. I was never good enough at coding to be able to write the code. There's no way. And I knew that. I'd written some code when I was at the museum, and I knew. Anyone here written in Fortran 4? Was somebody laughing? Yeah, it's horrible language, isn't it? The horrible. Well, I'd written code in Fortran 4 and in Algol. I knew enough to know there are people a whole lot better than me. I think I was sufficiently interested to be sitting in that gap because of course a lot of the people there at the time were people who were sort of very dreamy about producing computer games. Like you just snap your fingers and somehow they come into being. So I was one of the few people, and that was really the means. And as I say, I don't have the patience to write code all day, every day. And underlying it all is this thing, which is my message really for anyone else who wants to do this kind of games development. To my mind, this is quite important. All creativity comes from technical innovation. All of it. Not some of it, not every now and again, but every last bit of it. And my real excuse or reason for saying that is that the reason we were able to produce new computer games with new ideas in them because somebody had given us the platforms to work on. Without those platforms, we couldn't have done it, could we? And you can think about it in the same way in terms of electronic music. Rather earlier than we were working on these games, somebody took an electric guitar and put an amplifier against the strings and made an electric guitar. And there's an explosion of creativity in music that we're still benefiting from even today. And that's another example of, if nobody had invented the electric guitar, then what would Jimi Hendrix have done? He'd be going, oh, what am I playing? I've got nothing to play, it's not there. So the creativity, that's what the wellspring of it is you go and find the new technology, and that's what that would be my recommendation to everybody, is to go and find the new technology and see what you can do with it, because you'll come up with new ideas. That's what you'll do. And in doing that, you'll be like Michelangelo. But who's been to the Sistine Chapel? So you didn't think this would be a sort of wide-ranging talk, but it isn't it? We're going to finish. Pardon?
It's a long walk to get.
So it's a long walk to the Sistine Chapel. The Sistine Chapel attached to the St. Peter's in Rome. If you go and look in the Sistine Chapel, up on the ceiling there's Genesis, the book of Genesis, which is the guy did when he was in his 20s. And in fact, it's very interesting looking at it, because you can see he started off with Noah and things like that, and he put too much time and effort into Noah and all his mates and what have you, and made it too detailed. He was clearly spent, because further on in the sequence, there's a lot of detail, and you think he spent hours, days, weeks, months on that panel. And he's thinking the money's running out, I've got to do it a bit quicker. And so if you look at the rest of it, it speeds up a bit as he comes down this way. And the pictures get bigger, because by having bigger graphics, he can use up more space. And I think, I know, I've been there. And that he did in his 20s. And that's the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And then over there, on the wall, he came back, he got some more money from the Pope about 30 years later, and he did The Last Judgment. And, you know, it shows all the good people floating up to heaven and all the bad people being sucked down into hell, and the Pope sitting in front of the gates of hell, which is just a message from the Catholic Church, by the way. You know, the Pope is your guardian to save you having to go to hell. Well, that's just a message, and I think an improper one, but that's one of those things. But the key thing about the difference, and I want you to you can look at this up on the net, you don't have to go to the Sistine Chapel anymore. The key thing is all the background there is blue. And that's the difference between that one and 30 years later, that one. This is lapis lazuli that is used as a paint for the blue. And that's been invented. Somebody's learned how to extract it and create a paint from it in between the ceiling and the wall. And as a result, you get this spectacular Last Judgment on the wall of the Sistine Chapel. And the fact that it cost the Pope a fortune to pay for the paint was like, Michelangelo's saying, I don't care. You know, you're paying. I want it. This is the new technology. So that's my message to you and to all other people who want to become video game pioneers. Is go and find that new technology and go and have some fun with it. Thank you very much. I will take questions, but only if they're ones I can answer. Or you can all go down and have a cup of tea, I don't mind. Yes. Sorry, yes. We didn't know what to call it. You know, we've got 3D Space Wars, which we somehow understood, and then this thing, and it's slightly based on War of the Worlds from these three-legged things walking through cityscapes. So we were a bit nervous about calling it War of the Worlds, which I think is what Steve wanted to call it, and we would have got sued, I suspect. So yes, my apologies for that, but you know, we were rubbish in those days. There's also another game which we brought out about the same time called Dilithium Lift. Anyone remember that? Dilithium, that's from Star Trek, isn't it? Sorry. I used to work with lithium when I was at the museum. Have anyone seen lithium? It's grey solid. You have to keep it under oil, because otherwise, poof.
I've been to the Atacama Desert, where like 90% of the lithium is coming from. A large majority of the lithium comes from.
Is that right? Frightening stuff, yes. Frightening. You can take it in pills now. It's weird, isn't it? We have it in batteries.
I think there's one.
Oh, here we go.
All right. Do you ever think about rebooting some of these games?
He does. I don't. I don't believe in it.
Because I often think, you know, Nebulus would be amazing on a mobile whilst stuck in an airport.
Yes, Nebulus is an interesting one because of
It's
that.
so simple with the left and right, that's all there is.
Yeah, that rotating effect. There's a story that Gary Penn's downstairs. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but there's a story about one of his who he was at ZAP 64. One of his fellow journalists, Julian Rignall. There's a story about Nebulus at one of the shows at Olympia. This will be 1987, September 1987. Where we're showing Nebulus for the first time, and I'm standing there, and you know, in those days you used to have a screen with the games on there, and walking across the show from over there, there's Julian Rignall coming to check out our stand, and I sort of move over here a bit, you know, because I'm a bit of an observer, you know, I'm just going to watch how he gets on with it. So he comes to the stand, and there is these Nebulus, and of course it's stationary. Nothing happens with Nebulus while it's not doing anything, it just sits there. And he picked up the joystick, and as he picked up the joystick, of course he jogged it. And the tower went like that. And I saw him pick up the joystick, he did this. Imagine this joystick. Well, I was looking up there, and he sort of picked it up. And I saw him step into the game. And I thought, that's it, sold. He loves it. He loves it, because of course that's what it did. That you thought, I've never seen anything like that before, and that's a lesson. I've never seen anything like that before. We're a bit hooked on things like that. Do you remember when Steve Jobs did that with the mobile phones?
Yeah.
When he went biff like that, you know, like that, and we all went, I want one. And of course he did that, didn't he? He was a clever guy. No, so. Yes, I don't really believe in going back and doing these things again. I believe in doing new things. I mean, that's where... in my house, we've got a few paintings. We've got 5 paintings of Venice. 5. I counted them this morning. Okay. 2 of them are by my wife, and there are 2 from somebody else and another one. So we've got 5 paintings of Venice. Anyone here got a painting of Venice in their house? See? Paintings of Venice. And I bet you, if you went to Venice now, if you were in Venice now, bing, we're in Venice, you'd be able to wander around, you'd find somebody on a stool painting, wouldn't you? Yeah. And they'd be saying, oh, it's really exciting, it's so creative, creating a new picture of Venice. And I'm thinking, I've already got a picture of Venice, I've got 5 pictures of Venice, we don't care, he's got a picture of Venice. I know 2,000 pictures of Venice. If I want to do it, I'll find 2. What are you talking about? That's not creative. What's creative? It might be creative for you, personally. Oh, I've never done this painting before, ever. I've never done it, ever. Good. I'm excited. I'm excited for you, but not for the rest of us. For me, you've got to be doing new stuff, haven't you? Not Venice. The Arctic. Nobody paints the Arctic. Don't paint. Go into computer games. That's new. Or, you know, this wraparound stuff, you know, 3D, what's it? That's what I'd be doing now if I was in it. Trying to make that work, trying to stop people being dizzy. That'd be exciting, wouldn't it? Sorry.
Now, I wasn't here for the beginning of your talk, but you may have mentioned this already, but the logo, what's the story behind that?
Oh, right. Oh, well,
it's different to some of the other...
Yeah, I got a bit obsessed with this is the original logo. Right. My wife claims the ownership of that, so fair enough, she can have it. That was the original logo. This one, we did a blue one for a while, didn't we? You know, which I wasn't very keen on. No, I was an admirer of Signosis at the time with their, and I decided that actually what you wanted was an animal. And also Bovis. I don't know if you remember Bovis the Builders. Yeah. They had a hummingbird. You know, a pencil drawing of a hummingbird, which I thought was just fabulous. You don't, you know, some stupid newspaper advert, and it would say Bovis, and this, it would just, your eye would go immediately because you'd see the hummingbird. So I had the idea that we needed an animal. You know, because your eye goes to animals. You know, you see them move. Don't know.
I thought the other thing that was quite unusual about the name Hewson, for me, was that it had the word consultants in it.
Yeah, that was
not typical for video games to have.
No, that was a mistake. It's true. No, I'd done some consultants. I was a statistician at this time. You know, Can you imagine? Makes me sound really interesting, doesn't it? Hello, I'm a statistician. Sorry, I'm a statistician. I was a statistician at the time. I did some consultancy work, so we already had this pre-existing business where I don't know what I'd done. I'd analysed people's data. So Hewson Consultants came out of that, and by the time, I mean, I never expected any of this to happen, you know. So they needed a name to go in the book, HC, Hewson Consultants, and then it sort of got a momentum of its own. And of course, having my name in it, you know, my surname in it, helped me tremendously. It did actually dawn on me. I could have done without the consultants, but the Hewson certainly, you know, good idea. Keep that.
There's a question here.
Yeah, sorry.
When Hewson was defunct, some of the members went to join, was it 21st Century?
Yeah.
Which done the Pinball Fantasies, Pinball Dreams games, which were wonderful. And they've got games for iOS now. And a lot of people my age would love to play some of the games from Hewson, as we would Pinball Dreams. And it would make you a bit of money. I don't know how rich you are, but...
I'm really, you know, honestly, loads of money.
But you would make us happy.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, okay, I understand that. This is where we're sort of fast forwarding through my life, and you've got to understand that from my perspective, I got very sick and tired of it. You know, the pressure to produce these games all the time, to look for what's new, and really, it did. I mean, you find out a lot. You run your own business, you find out a lot about yourself. And I found out things I didn't really like, which, you know, I did. That's what I thought, this isn't good for me. And I think I lost, once we did the pinball products, the reason we did the pinball products is because I could see there was a genre there that we could exploit. I understood by about 87, 88, about that time, that we weren't generating enough cash in the business to fund the extra investment which future products required. And of course, I was clever enough to understand that that was true, but too stupid to do anything about it, which is what I should have done. But you know, you've got to forgive yourself for these things. What I should have done was just gone on taking the company to the stock market, floated it, you know, raised a load of money and left other people and told people what effectively would be lies to say, oh yeah, we just give us loads of money, we'll be able to produce whatever you want. But I didn't do that. I didn't learn how to do that. So that was really, and that era was really around 88, 89. That's when I should have done it. Probably before that, really.
There was a question over here.
I was just going to ask which you think was a better platform, the 64 or the Spectrum?
Opinion there.
It's interesting from all sorts of points of view. Ultimately, I'd have to give it to the C64. Sorry, it's a head-heart thing, isn't it? My heart says the Spectrum, obviously, because I know so much more about the Z80. Whereas I never wrote anything for the C64 at all. But the really interesting thing about the C64, of course, is it was made by a company called Commodore Business Machines. Do you remember that? Commodore Business Machines. And all their advertising was to tell you that it was a business machine, wasn't it? And everybody knew it wasn't. And yet that's what they advertised it at. And they still had, and the reason it failed in the end was because they didn't understand, you know, they didn't even understand what they got with the Amiga. You know, again, telling us it's a business. It's not a business machine. Don't be silly. Don't be silly. Stop it.
There's another one over here, Dan.
Another one over here. Be with you in a minute.
Thinking back to the Spectrum games, there's nice multicoloured rainbow effects on the title pages.
Yeah.
Did anyone ever think or attempt to use that in a game rather than just...
Well, that's what I mean about Nebulus. Yeah, you've got it in the ZX Spectrum. If you look at Iridium in the ZX Spectrum, it's got the rainbow on the opening page, which comes from the rainbow on the C64 version, you know, Andrew's original version. Do people know what I mean? There's a bar across the middle where basically in the frame flyback he's toggling the colours to produce an illegal effect, where you get a rainbow effect within the same block. And it was now John Phillips saw that, and he wanted to produce illegal effects as well. And what he did with Nebulus was, because he first produced it as a horizontal cylinder like this. That's how we first saw it, with a sine wave running over the top of it. You can tell he's a bit of an engineer, sine wave. How did he do that? He did it by toggling the character set. Those bricks in Nebulus are the character set being changed within the C64 during the frame flyback. So in that sense, it's a derivative of that rainbow effect, but it's toggling the character set to produce this rotating cylinder. And we looked at it and we couldn't think what to do with a rotating cylinder, this way round. What can we do with that? I don't know. Is there a game in there? Is there a game in there, Rob? I don't know. What do you think? Can we make a game out of that? I don't know. Poor old John went away saying, and he turned it upside, then made it vertical. And when he did that, of course, you could read it. Oh, it's a tower. But it's toggling the character set to generate that rotation.
Are you using the extra colours within a game on a Spectrum?
No, not really. I mean, partly because life moved on, didn't it, from the ZX Spectrum? It's sort of, new machines were coming through, and they became more important because we were following the market. Sorry, somebody at the back.
Yeah, how damaging do you think the software piracy to your business?
Oh, catastrophic. We'd have made, God knows how much more money, and we'd have had a lot more to invest in the business proper. Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. I mean, I can't tell you a number of people I've met who've told me, "Oh, I used to pirate all your games." Thank you very much. No, I'm not going to buy you a beer. No, catastrophic, I would say. I would say that was true for everybody. You see how the world is changing these days. With, we don't get piracy these days, do we? I mean, but in the book trade, the book trade's collapsing because people aren't paying for books in the same way that you see the newspapers disappearing. Nobody buys newspapers anymore. So that people aren't pirating that, but it's the same thing. When the income base isn't there, you can't do what you need to do. So yes, but you've got to be philosophical about these things. I mean, we get one go at this life, don't we? And this is it. I tell you what. Anyone here a bridge player? I'm really sad, aren't I? I play bridge. Play bridge on Tuesdays. And the great thing about bridge is you pick up the cards. You pick up 13 cards, and these are the cards you've got to play. These are the cards. I'm sorry. I know that's not an ace. It's a jack. Well, I'd like it to be an ace. It isn't an ace. There's no way you can make it into an ace. It's a jack. That's what. And I think life's like that, and it's the same with the piracy. Yeah, I think it was really bad for us, but that's life. Look at it another way. We could have all been born in Vietnam, at that time. That'd be horrible, wouldn't it? Bit better than that. Right, there we go. An event in March really knocked me, a bit sideways. Apart from the event itself, which I recovered from remarkably quickly, it is a bit weird. It's not something I'd sort of expected, and it's a warning to everybody really. Because I look at this, I've been to all these lectures now because that's what they do. You have a heart attack, and you have to go and do, like to give you punishment. Like you've got to go to the lectures to find out about how to do exercise and why you need to eat your 5 a day and what the they give you loads of pills as well. God, hundreds of pills. And you've got to learn about what the pills are for and why when you do exercise you should start slowly. Am I boring you yet? It's boring. It's really sort of knocked me a bit sideways, catching up with all that, and also because I run my own. I still run my own company. We've got an accountancy company which I'm handing over, which I was planning to do anyway. And I got all organised, and then suddenly, oh God, got to do it much more quickly and get on with it. So I'm behind on it, and this guy is helping me to get on with it. I can't see when it's going to be finished. I'm sorry, I don't know. It'll be done. My aim is to produce, like I did with these games here, is to produce something that I actually am a bit proud of. That's what I'm trying to do. Sorry, it's slower.
It's good, take your time.
I hope. Well, let's hope it will be. What do you think? What do you think the chances are?
Yeah.
I need to load of rubbish.
You're
Yeah.
a statistician, you should know.
Oh well, in that case, statistically speaking, what is the there's an interesting question. Any book you pick up, what is the probability that it's going to be a good book?
50-50.
Oh well, there we go. 50-50. I'll go with that. I think it'd be worse than that. I think it's 1 in 10. But there we go. All right. I think that's all. Thank you very much for coming along, and I will get the book done as quickly as possible. And thank you all for all your support over the years. I appreciate it.